Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 25 of the Industrial Wi-Fi Shop podcast. We will be talking about industrial wireless clients this go round. And today it is I, Scott, and as always, Jeremy Baker, the man with the plan. How are you doing today, sir?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm working hard or hardly working, but I'm here. Pretty good.
Rolling the classic dad jokes.
That's right.
Um, as always, before we get started, a couple of little housekeeping items. Be sure to check wyco.org. Um, their event schedule is filling up fast. They have it all on their website. They've got a lot of events going on this year. And on June 11th, Wyco, North Carolina, I will be at that event. So if you are in the tri-state area of Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and you want to come hang out with everybody, it's going to be a great event. So hit the website and check that out. Um, and then also, don't forget to hit the mothership, industrialwifishop.com, and check out our download library for all our great free and highly valuable content um, with reference charts and best practice papers and all that good stuff. It's all about the sharing of the information to help us all get a little bit better. So today, we're going to kind of dive deep into some industrial wireless clients. And this is one of the big differentiators from the industrial or OT universe versus your standard IT enterprise realm. Because not all the devices, well, actually, hardly any devices in controls and an OT do not have any sort of wireless capabilities built in. But there is a strategic need for a lot of these devices to be able to communicate over wireless because of how much money it can save versus standard cabling, or even just unusual locations where you may not be able to get cabling to at all. Uh, and so that brings to light the specialized wireless communication that we have to put forward because it's not about throughput because our throughput's very low in the grand scheme of things. So instead of hundreds of megs, we need hundreds of K. When you say that's right, Jeremy, I mean we're not talking massive,
Yeah,
but
most of them in what I deal with, it's usually like sub 1 meg, unless somebody's feeling frisky and then they want to send like 10 high def cameras worth of stuff across a wireless link.
and so on top of the lower throughput thresholds, we have a lower tolerance for latency in general. Um, and it's also all very deterministic communication. So we really try to take as much dynamic components out of the picture as possible because we want failovers to happen in a predictable fashion. We want our data to be transferring constantly in a predictable fashion. We want to make sure that everything is following kind of a preset configuration on how everyone's going to talk. Um, Wireless gives the freedom of movement that hardwire connections can't get you. And this is really especially true, obviously, with AVGs and robots and transfer carts and even a lot of conveyor belts are mobile, so they can be moved and adjusted and all kinds of stuff. But you have motors and controls for all these things. Um, you know, and this doesn't even touch on all of our IoT aspects, right? Or in this case, IIoT, right? The industrial Internet of Things, which is a conglomeration of all kinds of sensors and for anything, you name it, for what like a temperature, humidity, vibration, um, all kinds of things. There's specific chemical sensors. There's wearable sensors for chemical
You got
levels.
e-stop buttons, all kinds of stuff.
Well, that's also true, wireless e-stops and things of that nature. So there's a lot of these different devices that are now moving into that wireless realm because the wireless connectivity gives them so much more flexibility on placement. Um, and then that there's because they don't have their own wireless capabilities built in. We have to have a specialized client built for them that can, one, handle the environment, right? And two, adapt to the specialized power needs of these other locations, because you're not just going to have 110 outlets everywhere. And these are devices that are out in the field, so PoE switching is really not an option, right? So, in many cases, these are all DIN rail mounted devices, and they're powered by DC, direct current. So anywhere from 24 to 48 volt DC power supplies are required to fire these things up. Um, and then, some of these guys are even designed for hazardous communication. So you get your class one div one explosion proof APs, and it just gets really interesting in the grand scheme of things. But because of the types of devices that sit behind these specialized clients, these clients have to have different modes of operation. And so one of the first ones I kind of wanted to dive into is from Phoenix Contact. Let me get my screen shared here. Um, Phoenix Contact makes some great industrial wireless radios. Um, and this is what one of my lab ones look like. I have some in lab antennas on it. They're small little devices. They are DIN rail mountable, and they are DC powered, 24 volt radios. These are my lab antennas I have on them, but otherwise these are the external antenna models. They do have internal antenna models as well. But these guys are great, and they've got multiple modes that they can operate in, and which really increases their functionality. Let me get adjusted here a little bit. One of the great things is the 1970s yellow background they have for their web interface, which I really like. The next thing you know, you can get one of those avocado green refrigerators to sit next to it, and you can get the whole retro household thing going on.
They'll still run.
Yeah, well, they do still run. And I think that's one of the resilient things they put in these radios is that that reliability from avocado refrigerators. So when you go into these guys and you get into the configuration, now this is a WLAN 1021. So this is a 6 gigahertz capable client. Um, and it is capable, it's a Wi-Fi 6. This is not a Wi-Fi 7 client, but this is a Wi-Fi 6E client, and it can interface with Wi-Fi 7 just fine. I'm actually in the middle of a deployment with these particulars and connecting up with a Wi-Fi 7 deployment of Fortinet radios. So you go into your
Is that a
settings.
Pat,
Go
is that
ahead.
a micro SD card on the
These
on the
do
side
have the
port?
capability of having a micro SD card. It has a micro SD card slot in the side so that you can do hot swap. So if you have a radio die and you have an SD card in it, you can pull the SD card, put it in a brand new radio, fire up the radio, and it's already configured, good to go, and you can put it out there. So you really only need a pair of smart hands on site to replace one. Um,
That's awesome.
well, that's the case with most industrial switching too, right? Having the SD cards in there for the config backup, specifically for that reason, so you don't have to call in a high dollar network guy just to swap out a switch. Your E&I guys or your field techs can go out there and do the physical replacement, pop in, take out the SD card from the old one, pop it into the new one, fire it up, and then it just works, right?
This is just real quick, Scott. If you're one of my customers, don't spend the money on that. Call me and I'll do it. No, no, I mean, it really does make sense. Like I mean, pushing a config's not super difficult, but yeah, I mean, you don't want to spend the money to like fly somebody out to just log into a radio for 5 minutes and then just push a file to it.
Right. Um, Something else that you have to remember too with industrial radios is, and this is not true for all of them, but I'll say roughly 60-70% of them. And we'll use this WLAN 1021 as an example. It is a dual band radio. It is 2.4 or 5 gig. And I say or 5 gig. So you set it on what band you want to use, but you cannot use both bands at the same time. It's essentially an SDR, so you have to choose. And in this case, you have you can even set it to B if you wanted to for legacy devices. Although I avoid B like the plague. But you pick your frequency that you're using. In this case, for this example, we're just going to use 5 gigahertz. Um, and then you can set your channel widths and roll with it. Now, I was just testing some things, so I had this set for 40 megahertz wide channels and 5 gigahertz at on channel 36, and I kept its power pretty low at 12 dBm. But then we go into our actual WLAN interfaces, and this is where you can have some fun because there's multiple different operational modes that you can set this one device in. Right off the bat, you can set it into access point mode. Now, access point mode is what all of us wireless guys are used to. It's a standard 802.11 AP. Performs with all of the standard 802.11 functions that you would expect out of any Wi-Fi radio. And then it has a little bit of extra secret sauce in there that almost every manufacturer adds for their flavor of radios. So what that translates into, if you're using a Phoenix industrial client, if you use that with another Phoenix radio as in the access point mode, you'll get a little extra functionality out of it versus using a Phoenix client with, say, a Cisco or an Aruba or a Fortinet. Um, and that really, where that shows is in the different client modes. So the first client mode that we've got is an example of exactly that. It's their fully, they call it FTB, it's their fully transparent bridge mode. So this mode is a complete transparent layer 2 wireless bridge. And this mode is only compatible when using Phoenix radios for your APs. Full transparency, multiple devices behind it. You get to see everything layer 2 or layer 3. So MAC addresses as well as IP addresses. And it works very, very well. But you have to make sure that your infrastructure are also Phoenix radios because that's just kind of how this is designed to work. But this mode, again, allows for multiple clients behind the radio. Then our next mode, we have what they call SCB, or single client bridge. So the single client bridge is just that. If you're going to have one individual client device behind this radio, this is transparently on layer 2, but it's only one device that can be behind it. But the nice thing about this mode is it will work with any other 802.11 standard radio in AP mode. So if you have a Cisco infrastructure or Aruba infrastructure, whatever, it doesn't matter. This will be able to client right up, and that single device behind it will be able to communicate without an issue. But when you get into some of the industrial protocols, if you're trying to run that across, there are some caveats. The next mode is what they call, where'd it go? Right there. MCB, or multi-client bridge. Now, multi-client bridge is just that. Whereas SCB is a single client, MCB is multiple clients. So if you've got a bot running around, you have 4 devices on that bot that all need to communicate back. Then but you have a different wireless infrastructure, again, Cisco, Aruba, whatever. This is the mode you would put it in so all those devices can communicate back. Now, this mode is probably the most common mode that this client is used in. Specifically, I know it is compatible with Cisco WAPs, with Aruba WAPs, with Fortinet and Ruckus, because I've personally used these on all 4 of those. I know those work. But in this mode, Phoenix does not guarantee its compatibility with all radios out there. So if you want to use these and you have some obscure, uncommon kind of wireless infrastructure, I would suggest you get a single radio and test it out to make sure it's going to work before you deploy mass amounts of them. But something else that many industrial radios can do that you don't find in standard APs um, is a client NAT mode. So you can put a client behind it and completely hide what it is. So if that client is an IP address that you cannot change, but you need to have it match up with your current IP structure, then you can put it in NAT mode. So you can do a direct one-to-one NAT right there on the radio and just statically set the address that that device is going to translate to, which is really nice because a lot of times industrial devices that you get from the manufacturer, you either can't change or if you want it changed, you have to get a hold of the manufacturer and they have to send somebody out to do that. And that's no bueno just in general and can be honestly very expensive. So a lot of times people answer that with, putting an additional firewall in place. Well, with these clients, you don't even have to do that. You can just put it in NAT mode and you can directly change that address right there on the radio and not have to worry about an additional firewall in the mix. And on top of that, you can actually put it in a full DHCP mode using and set a range and then masquerade behind everything instead of doing one-to-one NAT. So you can have multiple devices behind it that it is natting for. So in the for our Cisco ITES, think PAT. You have NAT and PAT, network address port translation, and you have PAT port address translation. The old school, I think, Cisco explanation of that was NAT overload. But it's the same thing that your home routers do for all your devices behind your little home router kicking out to the universe. It just uses that one IP and then adds a specified port to it for stateful communications. Well, this radio can do that too. So if you have several devices that you can't set statically, you can just put them behind one of these and let the radio handle that for you. And then it's on the network and communicating like you need it to. So I hope you
Hey, Scott.
understand you can start seeing all the flexibility of these devices. Yeah, Jeremy.
I was going to say, real before you move on from the screen, will you click that question mark by the operating mode?
The nice thing about
Nice.
these is when you mouse over the different question marks, it gives you the breakdown of each of the modes before you, so you don't have to sit there and blindly choose them or go running across the internet trying to find manuals and read about them. Now, these also
Yeah,
do
it's
have a mesh mode, but mesh modes are for only operate on very specific Phoenix units, and this is not one of those. So while they use the same software builds for everybody, the hardware on this particular model does not support mesh mode. Not that I'm a
so
huge huge fan of mesh anyway, but
they put out one firmware for like the whole WLAN line.
um for these, yes, they have a new series that should be coming out. I want to say I was talking to John Finta. He's my local rep. Um, I want to say their new models are coming out in June, which are actually, and from what he has been telling me, they're beefing up the capabilities as well as adding a PoE component. So it'll be PoE or DC, which will be nice to have that flexibility. Um, so I'm not sure what that's going to have locked and loaded to it. He said he's going to try and get me a couple clients to test with. So I'm excited to get a hold of those.
Yeah, it's always annoying when it's like you've got one type of radio and then you've got another and you gotta carry like a different firmware if
Yeah,
it's got like a fiber SFP or just copper
right.
on it.
Well, no, and that's kind of common across most of their stuff. I know with their switching, um, it there's only a couple firmware variants that cover the majority of their switching, so it makes it nice so you're not having to keep 47 different files up to date.
Yeah. And are these able to do, because it's a 6E radio, so I assume they're able to do WPA3?
Yes, these are full Wi-Fi 6E capable clients, and WPA3. It is capable both of SAE and E, so it can do your standard PSK style with your SAE. Plus, it can also do WPA3 Enterprise with E. And actually, enhanced open, that's a new thing that they've added with some of the latest firmware. I think they keep WEP in there just in case you have legacy devices and have no choice to use anything but WEP. But anybody using WEP should be,
But you should just
drug out
wait
in the
till your
street
boss
and beaten. So,
just wait till your boss leaves and disconnect it and throw it away by accident.
but it's
Don't
nice
do
with
that.
any of their question marks. You can, when you mouse over, it gives you a fairly detailed, on the fly explanation of everything
Yeah.
that you can choose from. But I like the fact that these can also be used as NAT radios. Some radios can do that, some radios can't. It's kind of hit or miss in the industrial universe. I believe there's some Moxa units that can do this as well.
Does
Um,
it does this give you the ability to kind of tune like the its roaming profile?
yeah, well, you can go in and you can select what channels that you want it scanning
Mhm.
for. So you can really, if you know that you're only going to be operating on very specific channels, you just, if we're only going to use 36, 44, and 52, then we check those. It won't scan anything else. Those are the only things that will scan, which significantly speeds up the roaming process.
Yeah. Okay.
Anywho, so additionally, these guys have a VxLAN option. And so for those who aren't familiar with VxLAN, the VxLAN mode also offers, full transparency. And where VxLAN is useful in this kind of environment are things for some specialized protocols. And one example of this is PROFINET. So uh, PROFINET is kind of a layer two snob. When you have PROFINET devices communicating with one another, they really expect to see the real MAC addresses of each of those end devices. So what VXLAN does is it takes that packet and it wraps it inside a regular IP frame and then kicks it off to the other AP. And when it gets to the other AP that's also set for VXLAN mode, it then takes that wrapper off and kicks out the original packet so that you don't lose, so that original MAC address doesn't get stripped from the packet information. And in the end, that makes your Profinet devices happy because they see who they're really supposed to be communicating with. Um, and that can be done with Phoenix to Phoenix radios, and it can also be done really with a Phoenix to any 802.11 radio that offers VXLAN support. Now, a side note to this, if you're doing Phoenix to Phoenix radios, Phoenix AP to Phoenix client, and you're using their fully transparent bridge mode, this is one of those bonus things you get. You don't have to use VXLAN because it's automatically showing all of the MAC addresses that are behind it. So, if you don't have an infrastructure, there's an advantage of, moving forward with using same manufacturer radios for AP and client. But, and I fully realize, well, they fully realize, I fully realize, Jeremy fully realizes, everybody fully realizes, but that's not always the case. So, but I hope this begins to really kind of paint the picture of the versatility of these different industrial clients and what they offer for manufacturing floor devices.
What about let's look, what are the diagnostics like? What do you get out of that on these?
So when you hit the diagnostics, you can go through and you can see, like, when this is an AP, you can get channel allocation diagnostics, but this is right now it's in client mode. But what I like is when you do connect it up to something, you can get this continuous RSSI scanning for your connection, and it lets
Okay,
you know where you're sitting. So if
that's
we
nice.
were,
Yeah,
well, yeah, because I'm hardlined into it, I don't want to client up to one of my radios and create a
yeah,
loop
yeah,
and shut myself down. But it does give you a nice track record. However, when you go off the screen and come back, it starts over again because it doesn't save it. I do not know if there are uh, what are that APIs and webhooks to pull that information out.
yeah. But
I would
it's
have to
at
get
least
up.
having
Well, that's a good question for Justin, and we can go holler at him about that.
But at least having something like that where you can like run it and watch it, it gives you
Absolutely.
like, versus your air check or your sidekick or whatever you're using, right? Or your nomad.
Well, what I use this for is I was testing out for a current deployment I'm getting ready to go put some in at. Um, there were several different antennas that I was looking at. And so what I did is I got one of each, and then I set them up here in the lab and configured up the connections and just sat there and ran them for, 15 minutes to see what my levels were going to be so that when I figured out the best one, and it's not necessarily the one that maintained the highest connection, but it was the one that maintained the most solid connection with the least amount of deviance. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Um, and so that was really useful for the antenna selection process for pre-deployment. But also, when you're out in the field and you're having connectivity issues, it's nice to be able to go to this screen and be able to watch what's going on live on the radio.
Yeah, and a lot of times you physically cannot be in a place to capture even what what that vehicle or what that antenna is going to see. So that's really nice.
Yeah, and even then, so if I have to remote support these and I'm on a Teams call or whatever with a client, I can have them log in, pull up this screen, and we can watch real time what's going on.
Yep.
Then you have your trap manager for SNMP stuff. So there's a lot of different things you can do an alarm on. You can take configuration snapshots and stash them. And then everybody's favorite syslog, and you can configure your syslog.
Okay.
Yep.
That's a lot more than I thank you for that because this is definitely good information for me to have.
There's a reason they're one of my favorites because they're super flexible and they're also not, $3,000 clients. Okay. So
Yeah.
you get a fairly inexpensive industrial client to the tune around 800-900 bucks, depending on where you're buying them from. And even just on its general information, where you go for your device status, it's everything is very well organized. The Germans did a good job on this. Um,
Yeah.
and for all of your information stuff, so you can do a quick look at your logs and everything that's going on with it. You can get connection status for when you have it cliented up, or if it's an AP that has active connections, it'll have everything listed there. Um, and interface statuses, what its addresses are, its actual physical Ethernet port, what it's negotiated at, so on and so forth. Um, and then, you can do, we honestly could sit here all day going through all of the different configuration abilities of this too. And
What is
one of
that?
the
What is that
things,
stuff that's licensed on there? I'm sorry.
no, you know what? Honestly, there you go. So you can
Oh, okay,
pull,
so I got you. So it's like the actual
yep.
like internal component stuff that it uses.
Yeah,
Okay. So
honestly,
it's not
that's an area
there's
I
not
never
like a
clicked into. So
proprietary. Well, so because like the Siemens stuff or like the fluid mesh or the URWB stuff, some of the features are unlocked by a license. So that's why I was asking is like, is any of that stuff, you buy the unit and you get everything out of the box.
you buy the unit, you get everything out of the box.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, so you're not paying for bandwidth upgrades. You're not paying for feature upgrades. For with various licenses, you buy the radio, you get all the functionality out of it.
Well, sometimes if you have to do that, I'm not going to say any names, but you'd get a $1,500 radio, and then you'd have to buy $3,000 worth of licenses to get it to do everything you wanted it to do.
Right. So I don't know if you remember some of our conversations that we had with Josh in a few episodes back. But one of our big conversations was multicast. Um, and typically you try to control multicast, further up in the network. But if you don't have that ability to, you can actually enable IGMP snooping on these guys. And not only can it can help control that multicast right there at the device at the AP, but it can be a querier as well and start keeping track of that. So if you don't have that ability with other devices, you can actually do that with these radios, which is nice.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
Yeah.
and a lot of times, probably some of the people listening will run into this where you get kind of locked into, the IT has a global policy and they're not willing to change
Right.
anything for your specific site, but they also want to fuss at you about production being inhibited. And so it's like, okay, what?
Right.
So it's nice being able to have some of these like local levers that you can pull on this stuff.
Well, multicast is a fickle beast in general anyway, but in the industrial universe, some people use it, some people don't. But the problem is the wired industrial devices, their Ethernet connections aren't built to handle mass amounts of traffic, and it's easy to overwhelm them.
Mhm.
And you can easily do that with broadcast and multicast traffic, and being able to control that, especially more in a PLC environment, is pretty important. Now, some DCS systems don't want you to do any sort of throttling on multicast because they utilize it. ABB is one of those. So if you're on an ABB control system, as far as DCS, um, and they're passing their controls VLANs through your network infrastructure, they don't want you using any sort of multicast control because that screws with their redundancy, RNRP, and whatnot. So, um,
Nice.
yeah.
This
So
this might be a good time, just kind of while we're talking about, you know, eh, indirectly expanding feature capabilities too. Like, I know this doesn't offer PoE, but and some of the Siemens, like the newer cabinet clients, don't support that either. But you can always
gotcha.
get PoE splitter and then feed PoE into
That's
that,
true.
and
That's
then
true.
just do your 24 48 volt off of that.
Yeah, when John was giving me kind of the quick and dirty advanced notification of their new ones that are coming out, that is something they did integrate into the new radios is the PoE capability, so it can be PoE or DC. So I'm excited to get my hands on a pair of those and put them here on the bench and see what they can do. Anyway, so this is just a great example of the multiple functionalities you can get out of an industrial client. So it's a whole lot more than just helping a wired device get onto the wired network. But
Yeah,
these are ones
and
that I work with a lot. So, but you
yeah, and
primarily
I
work with well, you work with a bunch of different ones that I don't typically lay hands on.
we accept all comers, so it's kind of, you get the call and then it's like, okay, what's on here, and then you have, and if it's one you haven't worked with, you gotta like open the data sheets and the config manuals and see what you can get out of them.
Right.
The worst is when it's a vehicle that's got like a network card on an IPC that's running around, and I mean, there's a reason why there's like dedicated clients, because God forbid it's an IPC with a Realtek chip in it, because those are not, like, they just don't really handle roaming well to begin with.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, these have a great little form factor too.
I
Like,
do. I
it's
like the form factor on them. They're small, they fit in well. You don't have to make a ton of extra room on a DIN rail, especially if it's a crowded cabinet. Um,
Yeah,
and
or
then
even like sneaking that into a vehicle or something too.
well, absolutely. That's one of the other little bonus features of having a smaller form factor is a smaller footprint on a space confined
Is that
vehicle.
is that DIN rail adapter? Is that just screws that hold that on, or is that built
Yep.
into it?
The DIN
Yeah,
rail
so you
adapter is
okay.
actually a separate piece.
Yeah, so then you could just like directly bolt that on too
Correct.
if you
It
didn't need
actually,
to.
if you look at the top there, it has
Okay,
open bolt
nice.
hole and an open bolt hole, so they can be actually
I got you.
directly fastened to a wall as well.
Or people will laugh, but I had a customer one time, and they had this really tight cabinet where they were trying to put stuff in, and we were gonna have to get some like right angle DIN adapters and do all this stuff. And we're like, we could just use some industrial Velcro, man. Like, it would,
That's
and
true.
the guy looked at me like, like I farted in church or something. I mean, it was just like,
This is just your standard little RPSMA antenna connectors.
mhm.
Um, but
Oh,
by
and that is
contrast,
that little terminal block too. Like, you can unplug that
yes, you
pretty
can pop the
easily.
terminal block out so you can wire it and then plug it right back in. Or if you have to replace a unit because something happened, you don't have to rewire it. You just pop it out and you pop it into the new unit.
That's nice.
All models of the FL WLAN series use this exact same power plug.
Do those take redundant power to you, or like can you
These do
send two?
not. There's only a single power instance on them.
Gotcha. Okay.
Um, I don't find that very common on industrial radios. Do you? Is that
The
a
it's
Siemens thing?
the Siemens ones, most of them have it, but
So the other one
yeah,
I work with a lot is the ProSoft radio.
okay.
Um, so I don't know if you recall when Vic was on the show, Vic Perangelo.
Yep.
Um, he was filling us in on a few things, but these are great radios too. A little bit of a different form factor. Their DIN rail mounting is actually built into the back of the case of the radio. And so when they go on the DIN rail, they go flat like that. So they take up a
Mm,
little bit bigger of a footprint. Um, and then they have a removable power block on the bottom as well. So you can pre-wire that and then just plug it into the radio. Or these guys are PoE capable, 802.3A.
okay.
So 15 watt
And you
standard
got,
PoE port.
is that RS-232
That
on there
is an
too?
RS-232
Nice.
serial connection. So you can actually serial devices to this radio. Um, these guys are a little different. They operate in different modes. Um, so they have a variety of different configuration aspects as well, but it's a little bit different of a setup. Um, I deploy these a lot. These are just so easy to put out there. Um, when you look, I mean, right here on the main screen, once you're logged in, you have really four different modes to mess with. And kind of a similar fashion where you have the question marks with the Phoenix radios. When you mouse over a selection, it turns blue and it gives you a quick description right there at the bottom of the page.
That's
You see what I'm
nice.
talking about?
Yep.
And so, this has four modes: a master, a repeater, a bridging client, and then client. So when we're looking at these, the master is your AP mode, right? So that's your standard 802.11 AP mode. So um, pretty much anything can client up to it without a problem. Um, the repeater mode is what these radios come set as by default. So the repeater is really interesting because it essentially is a mesh connection. Um, to mesh back to masters, but also other repeaters can hop off of other repeaters. They don't recommend, as per any sort of mesh deployment, they don't recommend more than 3 hops out as far as doing that is concerned. Um, but it makes them incredibly easy to deploy and maintain for those in the field who don't have a lot of expertise or experience in wireless in general. But I really like that. Um, Really kind of one of the odd things about these guys is these are not Wi-Fi 6 radios. They're not even Wi-Fi 5 radios. They are Wi-Fi 4 radios. So they are 802.11n radios. And that's as far as they've ever taken this line because throughput values, they haven't seen the value in moving to some of these higher and well, I guess more advanced versions of 802.11 with all of the updates and whatnot because of throughput requirements. Now, the argument can be made of security, which I totally get, but they have a few additional features that you can turn on that help kind of mitigate some of the security issues that you think you would have with that. But the repeater mode is one of those options that's just it's going to be ProSoft to ProSoft. The repeater mode won't work with another manufacturer radio. So you can't client this up as a repeater to a Cisco or to an Aruba. It has to be to another ProSoft device. Um, Bridging client mode allows you to put multiple devices behind this. And then you can connect it up to third-party radios. So your Cisco, your Aruba, whatever infrastructure you happen to have. That is 802.11 standards based. So it should be compatible with pretty much any radio out there. But a key thing to remember, this does mask the MAC addresses. So if you need something a little more, and this is not VXLAN capable. So if you're going to need to be able to see the MAC addresses of the devices behind it, you're going to need to go master repeater route with ProSoft radios. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And then additionally, it can do a one-to-one client radio to where it's going to show the single MAC address behind it. It can auto detect this, and they recommend always using auto, unless for some reason it's going funky, then specify the MAC address manually. So I was talking about some of their security things. So it does WPA2 is where it maxes out at. You can set your AES encryption. You can use longer passphrases. You can also set MAC filtering. You can hide the SSID, but we all know that security through obscurity is not security at all. What I typically do is I go into advanced settings, advanced network settings rather, and I enable some of these other things. And one of the first things I always do, because I don't deploy ProSoft radios in with third-party radios, I always do ProSoft to ProSoft. And one of the first things I do is I go in and I hit the MFP checkbox, and that's for management protection frames. Because that's an option with WPA2. And so you just enable that option, and that really ups I timed out. That really ups the security factor with that. Plus, you can also enable where was it? Is it the advanced? It's ProSoft only clients. So anything that's not a ProSoft device, it will just drop the probe request and not even respond to it. So between
I like that ignore probes too.
well,
That's
yeah, I was going to say you can also have it set to just ignore other probes in general. So it will only listen for and respond to ProSoft only probes or clients that it's been pre-configured to communicate with.
is
So
that hey, is that range?
so
So if
yeah,
you have if you so that's like the guard interval or the
correct.
not the guard interval, but the like
The
the IF like the
the
interframe
TTLs.
spacing.
Yep.
Yep.
So you want to keep it on short unless you are going long distance, so you can increase the response time values, so it doesn't think it's a drop.
They should just call that setting Hail Mary.
One thing that's a little unusual with these guys, as opposed to setting transmission power, you set transmission attenuation. So they do it a little backwards, but it equates to the same thing. Well, and as where is the Phoenix is a max of a two spatial stream, right? You can actually do up to three spatial streams on these guys because they have three ports on the top.
Do they so if you only like let's say you use that ANC only antenna, do they recommend as like a best practice to put a terminating resistor on the unused port?
I have
Or
not
like
seen documentation on that. And the deployments I've done, the only thing I've ever done is leave the rubber cap on it.
okay. Yeah, because I know like the Siemens ones will tell you like if you're doing site so some of their devices like the one I have, they're three ports. So if you're only doing 2x2 on it, then it'll tell you to put the third one on there.
I haven't
Or to put
specifically
a
seen
terminator.
documentation on that, but to be fair, I also haven't looked for that to see if that's an issue. I'll check that out and I'll add it to the show notes.
Well, I just know that again, I won't say who, but there's some radios that or it's not a company anymore, but if you disabled the second transmit port on it, it didn't really do anything. So you'd have to put a terminating resistor on it.
Gotcha. Is that because they can't control whether or not
Yeah, it was like the
it's still going to be pushing RF out of that?
yeah, you definitely well, part of it was that the chipset was not super great in it. So if you disabled it, it didn't actually disable it. And then it'd mess up some of their internal algorithm stuff. So when we did some of that stuff on like some R coax, you would just leave them both enabled, put a terminating resistor on it, and then it, it's not receiving anything on there, so it only ever can do ISO.
Okay. And then if you go back and listen to the episode where we had Vic on here, he let us know that one of the reasons you want to do a ProSoft to ProSoft when you're using these radios is because, especially when you're talking a mobile deployment, is their roaming handoffs are sub 10 milliseconds. And that is because even though they're Wi-Fi 4 radios, they actually have the low level chipset access. So they're performing some hardware magic on the back end that allows them to really control, or have a really finite control over roaming, which drops those roaming times to nothing. And outside of these radios, to really get to that sort of roaming times, you're looking at spending a lot more money to go something like with the curb system.
Yeah. Well, there's also, we'll probably have to get them on and talk about it, but that Blitzfunk stuff is doing that TDMA
Yeah, we need
for that
to
stuff,
get.
and so that's
Yep.
like sub millisecond too, or that's like 1 millisecond, I think.
We need
But
to get.
that's when you get into that stuff, it's like, you kind of are like really pushing
Well, and
pretty
also too,
hard.
it depends on the needs of your deployment, right?
Yeah.
Does your deployment require that sort of roaming times? If we're talking, forklifts that are roaming around that are not, you're not overly concerned about it, then that's not really an issue. But when we're talking, finite control bots that are running around, I could see where that's an issue.
Yeah. Yeah, especially if it's like a fast process or something like that, you gotta have sync. But a lot
Right.
of times too, some of that stuff will, it's not just like, hey, we've got a client, then it pulls into a station, and then you might use something like that millimeter wave
Right.
stuff, or those other like Phoenix, like the short things where it pulls in and docks, and then you kind of offload that fast sync
Oh,
connection.
the wireless power
Those
data
Phoenix,
modules.
yeah. So like a lot that's what we'll see a lot of times too, is like you kind of have to, I'm not going to say that phrase, but you have to take multiple approaches, right?
Right.
There's more than one way to peel an orange. That's what I'll say.
So you've got some other diagnostic stuff on here, a little bit different than the Phoenix setup. So you can check your port status, and it gives you a fair amount of information there. Um, and then your address table for all the MAC addresses that it's seeing connected to it. So, uh, but it doesn't give you the pretty connection graphs. The best you get is your little strength meter up here at the top.
Mhm.
And this is really more telling on devices that are set as repeaters or clients. So you can get that, because otherwise the master's like, yeah, I'm at full power. I'm good.
So these are typically, like, if you're not doing as like an interface into like an enterprise network, or like a third party WLAN, these are typically deployed as single band, right?
Correct.
Is that the case with like Phoenix to Phoenix, or
Well,
do you get?
I'm going to say that's how I've deployed them. When they're in client mode to work with third party, obviously they can roam to whatever. Um, but even then, yeah, because when you're in repeater mode, which, that's the other thing, is if you click on a selection, it does give you the breakout of everything that it can do. When you're in repeater mode, see, you can only set your channel in master. When you're in repeater mode, it darkens that out, so you can't set that manually in repeater mode.
Oh, it just
It
figures
just
out
scans for it and locks into it.
what it's got the network. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's the some of those like proprietary protocol things, they'll say like, hey, we have the ability to do like multiple channels and stuff, but you have the sacrifice that you make there is then like, once you go into that roaming threshold, if you don't have a radio on the channel you're on, then you have to shut down the wireless interface, bring it
Right.
back up on the channel you're scan for a period of time. and then do that through a list of channels. And so then you're kind of losing that time too, because you have to catch whatever beaconing mechanism that it uses.
Yeah. So, I mean, while different, lots of flexibility with this guy too. And
Mhm.
this does have NAT capabilities.
Let's
It
go.
can do a series of one-to-one NATs.
Which that is you run into that a ton.
Hmm.
I mean, that's most of the, most of the calls that we get when these things start acting up is, the customer, that not the AGV manufacturer, but the customer has recently like switched WLAN controllers or something like that. And then that mechanism for processing the MAC addresses and like storing all that stuff in the ARP table changes, in how they execute it. And then all of a sudden you just have vehicles like stopping places. And a lot of times, like a NAT, like doing the NAT and then IP masquerading is like the quickest, cleanest way to
Oh,
like
totally.
just work
Totally.
around that.
Um, and then as you spotted on the bottom of this guy, it's got an RS-232. So, you can actually go in and configure all of your serial settings for that port too.
Awesome. Yeah. And it's funny because like a lot of times you're like, well, why would you use that? And it's like, well, this machine punch or whatever it is you're using is 30 years old, and
Doesn't have an Ethernet port,
it
but
it doesn't have it, but it's still running, and it's
right.
probably got another 20 years of life in it. So
And they're not going to pay to replace it.
yeah.
So those are the two I had on deck. What do you got,
And
Jeremy?
then what's the do you know off the top of your head like the IP rating of that version? Because they have like an
All
IP65
right, so
version of
these
that too.
guys are they're rated for higher heat than a standard AP, but they
Mhm.
aren't by no means IP66. I don't think it says on the back of them. Um, but both both of these guys have higher AP IP rated versions. You just have to go look on the site, but otherwise the software and the guts of them are the same.
I gotcha. Well, yeah, I guess it's my turn to show and tell a little bit. So, you know, what I have kind of in the notes is if you've been listening for a while, right? Like you'd realize that, Scott and I kind of work on, we're in OT, but we work in different application types. And primarily what I'm touching are mobility applications. You know, we'll do the same kinds of cranes and stuff, but I'm touching AGVs a lot, and most of it is actually like a client radio into a third party, and just kind of the genesis of like what we've used. Um, we're the company I work for has been a Siemens partner for a really long time, but just it's kind of nice because we've had really good results with that. But it's kind of a take all comers approach that we have. So there's like Airfly, Moxa. Occasionally like we'll get customers that use the Phoenix stuff, and so this has been really helpful too, and ProSoft. This has been really helpful too to just kind of like get some visibility into that. But kind of some of the Mac modes that Scott was talking about and some of the reasons for natting. The first kind of thing that I would like to touch on is like what we run into a lot is like a passive client, what's called like a passive client. And so that just means, you've got your client radio or your work group bridge. And then behind that, you have devices on there. So you have a wireless interface that's kind of almost like, the Macs don't have Ethernet ports anymore. So you use a dongle to do that conversion. So you're basically putting like a purpose-built wireless client device in there to handle that for you. And so it's a machine or like a forklift or something like that. And so basically like a passive client in the way that we think about it, like your PLCs and stuff like that. Sometimes the only time that they ARP is when it powers up, and then they don't just spuriously send traffic all the time. So typically like they won't, if unless it's controlled traffic, they don't just say, hey, I'm here, and then keep themselves fresh on that. So you might not get DHCP renewals a lot. So a lot of times you're doing static channel,
Yeah, I was going to
or
ask because if
like
they're dropping out of the table, then that's got to kind of if you're running DHCP, that can be a problem.
Yeah, so a lot of times, like, there's mechanisms and stuff to handle that, but typically, like, you have like a hard, on like a PLC or something, you'll have like a hard coded thing on there, but they don't just necessarily like ARP regularly. They'll stay alive in the MAC table because they're communicating, and so when the packet comes through there, the ARP table gets updated. But like PLC's IO sensor, all that stuff is, it purposely doesn't talk more than it needs to. And so like NATing, so using the network address translation or the port translation. So usually like you'll just do like an IP masquerade if it's in like a single device behind it. So you just say, hey, I want to have a 192.168, whatever, and every vehicle has the same internal components. And so instead of having a dedicated, vehicle controller IP and then a client radio IP, you now have just one, and then you're free to do whatever on the inside of that. And then if you have more things, like a lot of times it's the PLC that needs to communicate out. So it is nice to have like that MAC filtering and stuff, but it kind of cleans up some of that stuff so you don't have things leaking out of across the WLAN onto the wired side of that. And so I am a big fanboy of Siemens. In case you can't tell, I like the URWB stuff, and I do like. I definitely like. I think the Phoenix and the ProSoft stuff have the work doesn't typically come to us on that stuff, but I'm not. I would like to make clear I'm not opposed to that. I think that they definitely like serve their purpose, and definitely that 6E capability on that Phoenix looks really interesting in some of the things that you showed. So what they have is, their W734, 748. So I don't know if the video's going or not, but this is their kind of like IP65 version on the Wi-Fi 4 stuff. And
Okay.
it's got a 3 antenna lead on it. It's PoE capable. Some of them have like a digital input, digital output that they have in there. They, instead of using that SD card, they have on the Wi-Fi 4 stuff, they have a C plug. So it's like a little chip card. And then the
Okay.
newer ones are what they call a CLP. And so that's like, it's basically like a USB-C thumb drive thing that is special coded that's put in there. They do have licensing for their I features. So if you want to run some of their proprietary stuff like the IPRP or their point coordination function flavor that they offer. But just kind of generally, like, they have a cabinet mounted model that's IP30, and then they have like a little bit more hardened one that's IP6. Actually, I lied to you. This one's IP30 also because of the ports. But they have look at this. I brought all kinds of stuff. But they have the IP65 with the M12 connectors on there.
Okay.
They've got the punch through holes too, so you can mount it, or the expensive DIN rail clips.
Gotcha.
Um,
Are those
but
set up to handle vibration as well?
yeah. So these are like more vibration resistant.
Okay.
Then they got sort of usable LEDs on the front, so you can get. They've got line 1, line 2, so you can do redundant power into them. I really hate this connector, but this is the Wi-Fi 6 IP65 stuff uses this like funky
Yep.
L5 connector, which is
Yep.
like twice as expensive as a normal one. Um, but yeah, so on the Wi-Fi 6 stuff, the IP65 stuff is PoE capable. So it really sucks for the test kit because then now you got to have the PoE splitter
Yeah.
in there. But and hopefully, they're working on the Wi-Fi 6 stuff to bring the features up to parity with the Wi-Fi 4. But what's really nice in the Wi-Fi 4 stuff, which is still completely viable unless you have site requirements for like WPA3, which you should. But they've got, one of the things is like a dynamic antenna selection. So let's say you've got like an EMS carrier and you've got 2 antennas on there that aren't co-located. It's going to figure out which one's the best one to send or transmit on there. You can make also in the software, you can have it where the primary antenna port is TX RX, and then the second one is either RX only or TX RX. You can do, you can do NATing, you can do IP masquerading, everything does VLANs. They have some kinds of like layer 3 capabilities, not super hardcore. And one of the really nice things, which I don't know if Phoenix or the ProSoft stuff have this, but on their cabinet models for the Wi-Fi 6 stuff, you get a 4-port switch on the front of it as well, which can be pretty handy, especially with the netting, because then you can pull, then you get the opportunity to pull a firewall
Yeah,
off of
these are all single
the stuff.
Ethernet ports.
But also one of the things you were kind of talking about is it sounds awesome when you're like, oh man, we got all these new great data rates and stuff, but we've been in, so I've been on some very long support calls recently. And if the end customer isn't willing to kind of lower the MCS rates on some of that stuff, these things do sometimes try to like go the max speed possible, and then your retries shoot up, and it's like, why on earth would I need to just automatically do 150 meg data rate, and I'm sending sub 1 mega traffic? So some of that stuff is really kind of obnoxious to troubleshoot against, especially when the end customer is not willing to kind of help out on that. It's got to, Germans are really organized people, so I mean that nicely, but you've got all kinds of capabilities in there too. So like you can download the firmware from the radio. So even if you don't have the CLP, if you come into a system and they've got, hey, we stopped, we know this is a stable firmware. So you can pull the firmware off of a radio to use on any other radios in the system if you need to. You can download the configuration or a configuration pack that has the users and all that stuff in there too. You can get a human readable CLI file so basically like I can look at the config, and you heard me field a call right before this, so you can go in and look, okay, what's the power setting? What's the firmware version? Yada, yada, yada. Then you've got the logging is pretty nice in there. So you can get just like a regular event log. So like, okay, hey, there's like a low power condition. The radio isn't engaged. The WLAN authentication log, and they've got some really good messaging in there. So you can say, okay, excessive retries because of RF conditions, or, the station's left the BSS. So you can get reasons for roams. And then my all-time favorite feature on any client radio is they have a signal recorder, which allows you to, so you can get the clients. It's almost like having a site survey device for like built into the client. So you can enable this and you can set it for a period of time. It defaults to 500 milliseconds between samples. You can speed it up. I don't know what the fastest you can do is. We haven't really tested that, but you can get 3 times a second, 5 times a second. I assume it probably would start acting up if you try to get faster than 50 milliseconds between samples. But it gives you kind of like the Phoenix radio, you get like a on-web rendered RSSI plot, and it'll tell you the retry rate and the data rate, and it gives you a noise floor reading. Sometimes if you're not directly wired into it, or if the radio is trying to do data transmission, it will not render all of that stuff fully, but then you can go in and stop it and then download it. It'll give you a CSV that you can do data manipulation on, and I'll show you an example of kind of where we've been trying to take it recently. And then it gives you like a nice picture plot that you can open up, and you can say, okay, is there a single roam, or are there hammer roams, right? Like you've got high retries and it just can't maintain a connection.
So let's real quick, let's play the compare and contrast game. What kind of modes can this thing be put in?
Well, so it's typically just you can just use it as like a transparent bridge, essentially, right?
Okay.
You can have it do like a layer 2 tunnel. So if you're trying to do like PROFIsafe or some of that controls traffic on it, where it basically just makes the radio disappear, and act just like an antenna off of whatever your next device is.
So it's not hiding
So
MAC addresses of the devices behind it then.
no, so you
Okay.
would do, but you can set, so you can go into there and you can set like the Mac mode. And maybe this is a good time to, while I'm sitting here staring up at the wall, this might be a good time to, can you see my screen? Which one is it? Is this, did I pop up?
It was a black screen.
Look at this, man. Terrible at technology. Okay. All right.
Technology
see my
podcast has technology
You s-
problems.
You see my ugly mug. Okay. Yeah. So, and they've got nice manual, they got a ton of like documentation for stuff on here that so if you want to get in and look at like, what does this log message mean? Or, some of those things, you can pull that up. The data sheet, of course, it's not open.
Yeah, I don't think you're sharing right now if you're trying to show.
Not, oh gosh, look. Okay.
There we
How about
go.
now? Okay. How about that? Yeah. So the data sheet's kind of, it's a data sheet. But you can see their RPSMA, the IP65 stuff is in. It gives you the current draw and stuff like that. So if you're doing like your right size power supply calculations, all that kind of fun stuff. The firmware is hard to track down, and then you have to log in to do that. I wonder what I have in my. But looking at this, the password is password.
Super
It
secure.
won't let it won't let you do that, but it's got this. I think the newer ones are admin now, but they've got like a not published password. So that's, I've probably gotten 100 calls in my career of like, what's the default, such and such for this. But you get a well organized thing, and just kind of like one thing that is nice in the web GUI is so if the radio is not physically present, you got this little pop up that'll show you.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
Do you have a fault? Is the radio connected? It opens up a second window, so it'll tell you every feature that's on the page that's in there.
Well, it's nice that that's
JJ,
kind of fairly common amongst industrial radios
yeah,
in
yeah,
general, that you have the ability to pull up instant information on a feature or something you're trying to configure, as opposed to having to go search and dig for it.
yeah. And JJ would not be happy with me, but I haven't. This has been kind of in the test, but this was like the last test radio on my stuff that I actually still had. But you can get ARP neighbors log, the log files. And then if you need to, you can have it, you get info warning, you can kind of escalate what logs it typically saves on there. You only have so much information that you're able to do there. What's really nice, is you get like a good peek into this. So like, okay, it's connected on our guest Wi-Fi here. It'll tell you what the data rate is. So you can verify, hey, there's an active connection here. If there's, it's probably not going to show any other ones, but you can go in and check like rogues will show up on this. It'll tell you some of that stuff. So if you have, it's also, this is a really nice feature on here that kind of helps you. So if the customer's not really wanting to do like the full on NAT implementation, they've got this force roam on IP down. And so basically what that'll do is it'll send a series of pings. And if you miss like 4 pings, then it basically forces the radio interface to reset and reestablish connection, which then puts that passive device. This is a Band-Aid setting, but it'll basically like force that device to reestablish itself on the ARP table. But then, you've got the Wi-Fi 4 stuff still has a wizard on it. The new Wi-Fi 6 stuff, you have to just know where all the stuff is to be able to go into that. You can accidentally fat finger it at factory reset the radio, which is really fun. You got some Profinet settings, so if you need to enable that. The nice thing, which like the SD card, you can store the firmware on the plug, and some of the newer like the CLPs, you've got like a 4 gig plug, or you can get like a 64 gig plug. which is really nice because these have the ability to do like remote, which like the Aruba 501s did too. But you can do like a remote packet capture over that. So you can say, hey, I want the packets off the Ethernet interface, or I want the packets off the wireless interface, and capture those. So then you can establish like, hey, did this, I sent this message out. Did it actually come out of the wireless interface, or did I actually receive this packet? It's just kind of your common, this can be annoying because if you're trying to configure an AP and you want to allow a channel, like you've got to like bounce between menus sometimes to do stuff. They've got, the Siemens direct antennas, or you can do like a user defined, or if you say not used, it'll give you a little message to tell you, to connect that terminating resistor to it. These are 802.11n, so you can't use the channel 144, but you can either run this in 2.4 or 5 gigahertz mode.
What are the security options on these guys?
So this is WPA2 PSK, and
Okay.
then you can also do like EAP on there. And then I think I saw this on the Phoenix radio too, but it was like called something a little bit. It was like aggregation mode, but like you can tell it whether you want it to aggregate packets before it sends it, or usually like we'll
Right.
disable this for AGV stuff because we just want the traffic moving. We're not doing too much of that stuff. And then your SSID, all that information in there, and you got automatic. You could, so kind of like in the ProSoft radio, you can tell it a MAC address to pass. You can tell it to use its own. You can tell it to do a layer 2 tunnel. You can have it where it can roam to, you can configure several SSIDs. So if you're like changing buildings or something, and then you can, what is minimum signal strength? Is do this. Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. So so that has to do with like what the client's minimum signal strength has to be. It's under, going too fast. Go 211N. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. It was right here. Duh. So something that I didn't see that was on some of the other ones that's nice is you can tell it like, how fast do you want it to roam? Like what's the threshold? So it'll say, hey, if I see the retry spike and then I see a signal that's 5 dB better, I can go to that, or I want it to roam less. You can either like make it more likely to roam or less likely to roam.
Okay.
So we've seen kind of both of those. You've got background scan mode. So then that's so idle would be like if I lose connection, then I'm going to start scanning.
Okay.
And then this is not, so it's not in here, but in the newer firmwares, you have like a scan cancel. So like once you start scanning, if I see an AP that's at least so strong, then I'll stop the cancel, or I'll jump out of the scanning mode, and because I found an access point. So you can tell it to either like always or always do that, and then you can define the interval and stuff like. And then this is that, I mentioned this earlier, that force roam on IP down. So you can just, you create an access point. So usually it's like the vehicle server or something like that. That should always be up. And then you say, okay, once a second, I'm going to send a packet to this. I'm going to send it out of the WLAN. And if I lose connection to that, then I'm going to force a reset on the radio. And then this is the ticket right here. The signal record.
Signal recorder.
I must have not have enabled. What am I doing wrong here? Antennas, why are you're acting up? Look, the teacher asked me to do a math problem and I'm not. Get a glass act, right? Yeah, so it's it's side scrolling, and you can tell it like, if it's going to be a longer recording, you can tell it to be like some amount of samples, and then you stop it. Then you can go into like the system load and save, and then save that file down. And so then, did I lose my folder that I had it on? Hold, give me 2 seconds. So then what you get is you will get, you get a CSV that you can download. You can do manipulation stuff on it. So you can see, okay, are the retries high? You can get like a roam count out of that. But what 99% of people are going to use is this kind of pre-canned report that it gives you. It gives you a little dictionary of like what each of the things mean. And if you have an AP, Siemens on both sides, you can get metrics from both of them. But I think this is just, this might have just been testing like a client, like a single doing like an AP on a stick kind of a thing. But you can see,
Interesting that you actually have reporting software built into the radio.
yeah. And sometimes like, this this thing will lie to you, right? Like if you run this is going to kind of not really look super clean as it runs. Oh, it's got the samples. So as you have this, right, and it'll not render some of these records and stuff, even if there's data there, but the coloring is kind of off from what the actual like report will send you. And so this is really nice if you do it in like a small controlled kind of way, and you say, hey, the vehicle's died when it goes under this mezzanine. So then you say, hey, stop the vehicle 50 feet before the mezzanine, start the recording, run it under the mezzanine, stop it, and then save this out.
Okay.
If this one had a roam in it, you could click and it would jump into the recording. So maybe this one's got some roams in it. So
that's quite a hefty amount of diagnostics.
Yeah, so I think, and this one's actually like marked up. So this, you don't get these lines in here, but that was just like I did a PDF markup on this to show kind of where the average signal was and then what the lowest parts were. But if you zoom in on them, like you can click this and it'll jump you to that information. But what is a junior engineer for? But to make your life easier. So now we've got, we've got a tool that we've written for like herb parsing. So we wrote a parser for this, and so you could see like the whole section of this, but also like let's say you had a ton of roams or something, right? You can click and zoom a little bit in on that and look and say, okay, well, what is this roam looks interesting. What's kind of going on in here? To kind of do it. You say, oh, the signal drop down here. You can look at the data rate, and then we've added into this a like a delta RSSI feature. So then, if it's negative, then that means that the client is louder at the the access point is being received more strongly. So you can test kind of like your antenna match on there, and all those kinds of things. So it's I'm not trying to like fangirl on the Siemens stuff, but you get like you have a lot of information where you can really like get in the weeds with some of the stuff and dial it in, and really for stuff like validating like an RCoax segment or something like that, like how do you give like a this works kind of a report, right? You can't, maybe with a Hamana clip, you can put it under there kind of in the same position near the RCoax, and then, and then follow it along and click and run your survey, or you can use that WLAN Pi as a remote connection, which we've done a bunch. So it really kind of becomes powerful. And then we've got some, I don't want to turn this into like the internal tool discussion, but it gives you just a ton of features. You've got, in your layer 2, you've got port-based VLAN, MAC aging, some spanning tree stuff. You can do, all your natting stuff. So you can do just straight up NAT, or you can do like the NAT P with forwarding. You've got some ACL stuff that you can do in here. all that kind of stuff. And then that's not even touching on like never even done a HT or an MC IPCF, but they're point coordination functions. And then you've got that like the protocol that time forgot, right? Like the instead of like DCF, which is most of it, where it's like we're gonna fight, and then if I'm the one that starts talking first, then I get the time slot, and you might just miss out. It basically makes every associated client get a time slice in in like a predefined window. And then so you got, let's say you've got like 10 milliseconds of communication time that you're allowed to every 32 milliseconds or whatever it is. And then once everybody's gotten a chance to speak the rest of the time in there, if anybody else has anything, then they can say, hey, I've still got more data to transmit. And then it'll get assigned a window out of that remaining 32 milliseconds or 64. So that you kind of typically like that, you'll sync up with the PLC. And then we tried to use IPRP on some stuff several years ago. It's not super common, but really, like, if we're being honest about it, it's easier to just do a redundancy box and do like a PRP link out of the wireless LAN and just not configure those there, because it's not necessarily always like, hey, we're going to do this with a Siemens radio, but it's nice to know that it's there.
So I got while we were talking, I got the Phoenix cliented up to another radio.
Okay.
So I'm gonna steal your.
I'll stop sharing.
So you can see it's nice little spark line that it's running from when it started recording.
Yeah, and that's totally, the thing is too, is right, like it's showing all that information, like that's nice information to have, but you can get most of just having the RSSI, that gives you most of what you actually need most of the time. Like a lot of that stuff is, if you have a roaming problem, like it's pretty evident, and you can get around it too by doing like over the air packet captures and stuff
Right.
too. So you can see, you could just, it's pretty trivial to like like get into Chat GPT or something and say, hey, I've got a wireless LAN packet, which you might not necessarily be able to do that like on if the ProSoft stuff is encrypt. Well, no, that's all like 802.11n too, right? But they just manipulate at the chipset.
Right.
But you can see like, hey, this thing just keeps having to like reassociate. Like you can get to this information, it's just not as direct.
So you can sit here and you can pause the recording, and it'll sit there, and as you move over, it will adjust and tell you what your peaks measurements are up at the top.
Yeah.
But
I'll tell you
while
what,
it's recording,
you can't do 6E with any of the Siemens stuff yet. So
oh, you can't.
no, they don't have
Okay.
any 6E stuff yet. And I
So I
think
mean, even though this isn't as in depth as the recording tool that it's on the Siemens, it's still, even something as simple as this can help you a lot in certain situations.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Like it's it's nice to have, but it's not like a requirement. And really, like it's kind of incumbent on you as the, which also, like I wouldn't say every single customer that we have has a Siemens radio, so it's so the stuff's there. But one of the other ones, I loaned mine out, so I didn't have one to lab up, but the Onyx stuff, which we've had Toby on before, they've got an RSSI logging feature in there where you can put a thumb drive, or you can store it on the radio, and it just gives you similar kind of thing. And I mean, even probably something like this, you could probably have something that just you don't see me pointing at your screen, but right there where it says like Mac RSSI,
Yeah, up here at the top.
this is a web application, so you could probably very easily figure out what that web element's called in the web page and have Chat GPT write a script to monitor that, and build your own RSSI log out of this.
I definitely, I'm going to be talking to John about some kind of way to export this data, because it would be
Yeah,
nice
because
nice to have it as exportable.
it's nice to have it, and if they have some of that stuff, and even if they don't want to, some people told me recently, they limit what they make available because sometimes that just increases the calls that they get about, oh, I changed this setting, and 99% of the time you never need to touch that. Because I mean, even like a lot of that like IPRP stuff, like you're only doing that when you're going into somewhere and um and it is a truly like high availability, like if this process stops, it costs you $100,000 every minute, or
Right.
something like that. Like you don't, if a bulk crane stops for 5 seconds, that's not, that, well, maybe that might be a bad example, but like sometimes it's not, like a 1 second delay every once in a while is not like world ending for a lot of people.
Right.
Because like you end up with, okay, well, I've got 10 AGVs with product on them that are waiting to offload in this machine. So if the 11th vehicle gets there 1 second later, it's never going to matter.
Well, the point of everything that we've discussed today is really to show the versatility of what industrial wireless clients provide, and how different it is from your standard enterprise 802.11 universe. Um,
Yeah.
and I think we've done a good job at showing that because between the Phoenix and the ProSoft and the Siemens, you have three very different radios that provide very similar functionality. Um, some are able to provide reporting, some are some diagnostics, but abilities like natting and masquerading, and things like that are abilities you're not going to find in enterprise radios, uh, that are or let alone RS-232 inputs for
Yeah. Well, that and
analog
that
assets.
I do think that that's something that is really interesting about that Onyx stuff too, is that they've got a ton of configurations that you can get. So if you need they have multi-port, and then they also have like RS-232 inputs. They have a 6E client as well. I don't know about, I do think like a hat tip to Phoenix is it sounds like there's a ton of people that are available for you to be able to reach out to and actually like get on the phone with somebody when you have an in-depth problem. I mean, I've
Phoenix
had some
has
questions.
really good support, so that's
Yeah.
one of the bonuses to their systems.
And that's and really like I would say that's probably like one of the biggest things is like if you've got somebody you can get on the phone when you really run into a problem,
Right.
that's worth that's worth more than most of these features
Absolutely.
that are in there. So
Well, I hope everybody listening and watching was able to get something out of this and understand that the realms that Jeremy and I live in, while we do operate off of all of our favorite 802.11 standards, there's so much more to it in OT environments, and hopefully we can get some Onyx radios and some others, and kind of do some deep dives on those to show you yet more versatility of what lives in our universe. Um, I want to thank everybody for taking time out of their day to listen and or watch on YouTube. We really, really appreciate everybody, and I'm looking forward to the next deep dive that we can set up. Any ideas for future deep dives, Jeremy?
I think that an antenna deep dive would be really good. I think that we should definitely, because it's people like the funky stuff, that blitz funk TDMA stuff. I think that's definitely something
I
we should
think
get
that's a
on soon.
fantastic idea. I want to get Toby back in here and do some deep dives and some of the Onyx gear. Um, and I want to circle back around Halo and to Halo, and I want to dive deeper into some of the Halo devices we've got, and see how they compare and contrast to some of our other industrial radios.
Yeah, and I think we should probably like set up a circular firing squad at some point in time and get some inter-company people on to rib each other a little bit.
See if we can get AP Fight Club going on.
That's right. And if anybody listening has any suggestions, by all means, reach out to us.
What do you want to hear or see for deep dives? Let us know. We are happy to go into any of these directions. If it's industrial, if it's in OT, we'll investigate and we will do a deep dive for it. So just let us know. Hit us
Oh,
up at Scott or at Jeremy at industrialwifishop.com.
got one more quick thing. We should definitely do a deep dive on like waveguide systems.
Oh, that sounds interesting.
Yeah,
You hear that,
they can
kids?
be.
Lots more in store. Thanks everybody for coming and hanging out, and we will see everybody soon on the next edition of the Industrial Wi-Fi Shop.